Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 51 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we are going to continue on our reloading series. So this is part 3 of our series. We have some updates on some upcoming courses and to send out there as well, and really excited to share some future products that we will be offering here at Wolf Precision, as well as maybe some really cool services. So without further ado, thank you for joining us, but here we go. All right, so this is part 3 of our reloading series, and in this one, we're just going to touch base on some things to think about when you're actually making the ammunition, things to keep an eye on. Again, these are meant to be tips, tricks, guidelines, but these are not instructions, and we recommend that you read, go back through, go over all of the owner's manuals or instructions that actually come with the kits and products that you plan on using. There are some great NRA courses out there on reloading and advanced hand loading. So I really recommend that you go and get professional training. You cannot go and reload just listening to this podcast. So I just heard back from a really good customer of ours, Larry, and he was telling me about some high-end ammunition that he purchased for one of our 22 Creedmoors and does not reload, and went out to the range and shooting it and was blowing primers out the back of the cases. And when he contacted the manufacturer, they gave him the old sorry about your luck story, or, this is what our chambers are cut for, this is what our throats. Anyway, make a short version of a very long story. This was one of our test rifles on which we actually worked loads up for. So we know the load data on this rifle, and the manufacturer of this custom quote-unquote hand-loaded ammunition will not release the load data for it. The reason I bring this up is, number one, if you're buying a caliber and you're not reloading, sometimes people in certain situations can take advantage of you as far as pricing goes. So, for example, some companies introduce their own calibers, whatever the name you want to put on, 30 caliber, whatever, Boom and Louder. And then they make their ammunition for it that's proprietary, and they charge you $100 or $120 for a box of ammunition. Now, this is really common. And so they want something that's a consumable product that they can keep selling you, because once they make the sale to you, they might not see again. And so it's having the customer come back and continue, or being forced to continue to purchase product from you. And then you've got people that are, again, in the business making ammunition that can cause people some problems. And just because it's hand-loaded or quote-unquote custom-made ammunition, it doesn't really mean it's safe in a lot of different rifles. Obviously, this is severely overpressured. According to all the testing data that we've done here, we can run them pretty fast. And we've never had any issues like that at all. So either it's the powder issue or overcharges, or somebody fell asleep at the wheel when they loaded it and just have too much powder in there to begin with. Who knows? But this is why you reload. Number one, it is an art and a craft. I think a lot of people that get into it enjoy it. And it really does allow you to make better ammunition than you can buy, and at a huge cost savings. I know there's time involved in it, but number one, you get to control the quality of it. And number two, long term, you will save an absolute fortune. And number three, you honestly will make better ammunition than that of what you can buy. So whether you go out and buy, the custom ammunition from manufacturer A, B, C, or D, I don't think there's any comparison as to what you'll get when you make your own. So in this podcast here, we're going to talk about actually making the ammunition and some things to take into consideration. Offer you just some pros and cons. Like, I'm trying to keep my opinions out of this particular podcast and just give you food for thought when you're setting up and reloading and actually making the ammunition. So I do clean my brass before I reload, and I think I really do and recommend it. I used to wipe all my brass off by hand. trying to clean it all up years and years and years ago, and then I would lube it on a little lube pad and start the sizing process from there. But I think the tumblers and, like, for example, we have a Dylan one here that it vibrates and cleans them with a media and a little bit of cleaner, and it does a super nice job. Whether you punch your primers out before you clean it or after you clean it, that's your call. I actually clean my brass with the primer still in it, and then I punch the primers out when I full-length size. So you're really going to have to invest in cleaning your brass and just making sure that everything's nice and clean, because when you spray the lubricants on it to run it through the press, if you have a lot of carbon, dirt, debris, and everything else, it now gets inserted inside your die. You'll start to notice cases getting scratched, and you can potentially wear out a die, I guess, if you get enough abrasives in there, but you want to make sure that the brass itself is fairly clean. Once you get through that process, of course, we use an air hose. We blow everything off, make sure there's no media on it. You can use different, like there's walnut, there's I think some type of corn type material that they'll use. Some of it's really dusty, and so do your research as to what media you want to clean with. Some people use like stainless steel shot. There's all kinds of stuff you'll see out there. I think the stuff that we use is the corn-based, not the walnut-based. I think the walnut-based is the one that can be dusty. But either way, I always clean my cases out. I have a little rotary basket. I roll the cases around as much as I can, make sure they're all nice and clean. I take an air hose and blow them out, make sure that everything's, nice and clean outside and in. Make sure there's not a bunch of media inside the case, tumbling media, that type of thing. And then I flip them upside down. I spray them with Hornady One Shot, and then I flip them mouth side up, spray them with Hornady One Shot again, getting a little bit inside the case mouth. And then I start my reloading process. And I'm just going to go through piece by piece things that I do on a single stage press to reload and try to give you some pointers. Number one, I use a full-length sizing die, and I'll take 10 pieces of brass. I'll size them. I'll follow the setup instructions from the sizing die, full-length sizing die, and it's usually turning down to the shelf plate, then backing off a half a turn or something like that. And I'll take once-fired brass that's been out of my gun. This is really important. Make sure you're sizing brass that was fired out of your rifle only. Chambers are all over the place, and I tell customers specifically, do not take ammunition that was fired in any other rifle and try to reload it and stick it in our guns, because you can wind up getting cases stuck. You can just all kinds of trouble. So I only size the ammunition or reload ammunition that's been fired once fired in my own rifle. From there, what I do is I keep turning the sizing die down until I can get the bolt to close freely on the sized case. So let's just say I size 3 or 4 cases. I'll run them through the gun. I'll wipe the lube off, run them through the gun. And usually once you size it, it pushes the size in, pushes the shoulder up a little bit, and then you'll start to get some resistance on the bolt. And so I'll turn the die down a 16th of a turn. I'll do the next 4. And I'll turn the die down a 16th of a turn. I'll do the next 4. And I'm going to continue doing this until I get the bolt to close freely. And then at that point, I'm going to take 10 more cases, and I'm going to lube them all up, and I'm going to size them in what is now potentially my set size, or my setting on my die. And then I'm going to test those, all 10. And I'm waiting to see if one of them is still a little stiff, because brass can stretch differently. Different cases can be of different thicknesses. And so I'll run all 10 through, and if the all 10 go through perfectly, great. If 1 or 2 are still a little tight on the close, then I'll move the full-length sizing die down one more time, 16th of a turn, and then I'll do 10 more pieces. And basically, I'm using the brass as a go and no-go on how much I want a full-length size or bump the shoulder. And I do use a full-length sizing die because I want them to feed and function perfectly. I don't want to have any issues in the middle of a match of going to close the bolt and have a stiff bolt close. And I don't really think you give up that much accuracy in doing this. So once I feel comfortable that I've got my die set up the way that I want it, then I'll take all of the brass that I already sized one time, working and trying to set my die up, throw it back in the bin. They all get relubed, and now they all get sized, right? At that point, I do seat my primers, and you can do that in a press, or we have I believe it's made by RCBS, priming tool, or you can get a hand priming tool, whatever you like, but you are going to seat primers. And I did talk about in the last episode about different primers, and they can have different, hardnesses to the cup or how they handle pressure. So I always go with CCI matched primers. That's just me, but just know that some primers are softer than others. So I'm going to seat my primers. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses. I'll just throw that out there. You can get these primer tubes to go up. If you get a primer that goes off, depending on what type of press or situation that you're in, you get one that goes bang. It could really not only scare the crap out of you, but we're talking about seating primers here. But sometimes I've heard of incidences in different presses where you can get the whole priming tube to go off. That's not good, so I always remind everybody to wear safety glasses in doing this. So seat your primers. And you want to make sure that the primers are seated below the surface of the base of the case. You don't want to have that primer sticking out beyond the flat spot of the case base. So make sure she's seated properly to the bottom. You can clean your primer pockets, before you seat your primers, if that's an option. I don't. You can square your primer pockets with tools. I don't do that either. You can open your flash hole up with a flash hole tool. I don't do that anymore. I used to. You can turn necks, like advanced hand loading stuff. We're not talking about any of that stuff. We're just talking about taking once fired brass, resizing it, and making more ammunition for your rifle as a new reloader. So you're going to seat your primer, and at that point, you're going to line them all up to start dumping powder. Now, before you do all of this, make sure you pick out the bullets that you want to use or potentially try to work up loads for. You can get the Hornady overall length gauge to measure how far you're going to let your bullets jump. Read the instructions, but you're going to take this Hornady overall length gauge with the bullet. You're going to stick the bullet in there. You're going to put it in your gun and basically follow the instructions. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you a measurement to the tip or to the ogive of where your lands and grooves are at. So how far out you can seat the bullet in the case before you come in contact with your rifling. I do jump bullets. I don't seat real close to the lands. 17 thousandths to 20 thousandths is normal for me to be off. I don't want anywhere close to it. And I've read lots of articles where they're saying you can jump 50 and 70 thousandths and still almost have the same type of accuracy. And I actually believe that. We've done it here just out of curiosity, seating bullets really far in the case, jumping 50, 60 thousandths, 80 thousandths in some cases, and the group's really not changing much at all. One thing I have heard is that it does reduce the pressure overall because it gives a chance to bullet for the jump. That's just what I've heard. I don't have any documentation or verification that that's true or untrue. It's just some conversations that I've had over the years with people that say that that's one of the benefits of it. So I make sure that I set my overall length, that I am jumping. I don't want the bullets into the land, so I'll use that tool to gauge how far I want to seat the bullet into the case. And I usually just go off the tip. You can measure off the ogive if you like. It's a little bit more accurate, but you take 4 or 5 readings with a couple different bullets to just get a good average. And let's just say, for example, you're testing a bullet for whatever 6.5 caliber, and when you're pulling them out and measuring them properly to the lands is 2.820. Well, then I'll probably start seating them right around 2.8. And I'll let that 20 thousandths jump. So at this point, you're going to go ahead and start throwing all of your powder. And I always start low, and we've had this conversation today with Larry about reloading for the 22 Creedmoor. And I had another customer that we spoke with yesterday on reloading for the 6.5x47 Lapua and even the 6 Creed. Usually, as you're working up through your loads, you'll find an accuracy node at a lower charge or the rifle shooting fantastic, and then you can keep going up in powder charge and sometimes find a second accuracy node, but this time close to max pressure. Sometimes you end up in max pressure before you get to that second accuracy node. I always go with the lower node, and we were talking about this yesterday with a customer named Mark, and we're going to talk about it today. I spoke with Larry about it. Too many times manufacturers or custom manufacturers, they're always going for the fastest, got to have this crazy speed type mentality. Speed does not win the race. An extra 80 feet per second is not going to get you in the first place. Super high quality, super high accuracy, good fundamentals of marksmanship, being able to read the wind, that's what wins matches. Pushing the envelope on pressure, thinking that speed is going to buy you a win or be that last little bit that's going to finish off that animal, is just leaving you open to back pressure from a suppressor. It's leaving you open to your ammo getting wet and blowing primers out because you've lost all that space in your chamber because the water's taking it up. These are real issues. And so I always go with the lower node. For me, I'm not a speed junkie. I'm accuracy junkie. And I often find that the lower node is actually a little bit more accurate. And so let's just say we have, for example, whatever caliber, and we're using a specific powder, and we look it up in multiple books, and we say, okay, I ran this powder across 4 different books for this caliber, and what I'm getting is 38 to 42 grains. 42 grains is consistently coming up as a max load. Well, too many times guys are loading 42.5, 42.7. They're just pushing and pushing and pushing. Start down at that lower node where it's saying, okay, starting load at 38 grains, and start working your way up through 3/10 of an increment, 3/10 of a grain. And you might be surprised at like at 39.5 or 41.1, way less than 42, the rifle's shooting one ragged hole. And then you keep going up, trying to go to that max powder charge. Groups open up, then they sometimes shrink back down again. And either you're overpressure or borderline of it. And so the one customer had said, well, if I increase my charge load just 1/10, I start to see pressure signs. And I'm like, you're too close. Back way off. Way off. And he's like, well, if I go down 7/10, I have another, really nice load. It shoots really nice if I go down to this next step down. And I'm like, I would be shooting that in a heartbeat, because when the ammo gets hot or your brass gets wet or snow, any of that, it takes up room in your chamber. You're going to have pressure, and you're going to start blowing primers or sticking cases. Never, ever, ever run that close to a pressure load or something that's going to cause you problems, because it's going to happen. And so go to that lower node and enjoy the rifle, and know that when it rains at a big match, that there's going to be rifles that are going to lock up bolts as solid as a drum, beating them open with rocks and anything they can get their hands on to get the brass out, and you're not going to have any issue. I mean, we're trying to reload accurate ammo, but we want to reload ammunition with as little issues as possible, I think, is sort of the goal. So stay away from that max load. Also pay really close attention on how you're throwing the powder and even how you're dumping it in. I always do it in lots of 50, so I have multiple trays with 50 pieces of brass in each. They're sized, they're primed, and I just work down one at a time, dumping the powder in nice and evenly. And I'll do all 50 cases. I don't seat bullets until I have powder in all the cases that I'm going to seat that day. And so let's just say I'm doing 200 rounds. I'll have 4 trays there that are primed, and I'll do 4 50-round trays with powder. And once I do that tray from top to bottom, I inspect with a flashlight inside each and every case mouth, going back and forth, making sure I didn't miss one, because that's the one that's going to cause you some big problems at a match. Who wants a squid load? Not a good thing to have. So just take 2 seconds, look through all the cases, make sure that you've got the appropriate powder charge. You can look in there and see the level. And of course, we're weighing the charge, but just verify that you have powder in all of your cases. And then for new shooters, I really do recommend a balance beam scale. I think they're clean. I think they're simple. They're accurate as can be. Some of them are probably most accurate scales you can get. And if not, make sure you properly calibrate this scale that you're going to use, and make sure that it's not wandering around. So every once in a while, throw a charge and weigh it to make sure that it's not maybe on a second scale, to make sure that you're not going out of calibration. Now, the scales are getting better, especially the digital scales. They're getting fast and they're getting better. But don't take it for granted, and just make sure you double check and verify. Last but not least, seating the bullet. So I don't crimp. We're not shooting out of an AR for the type of shooting that we do here. And this isn't pistol ammo, this is rifle ammo. So I use a really good competition seating die that has a micrometer on it, whether it's a Forester, a Hornady, a Redding. Make sure that it has the appropriate seater that's holding the bullet properly. So some of the really long tipped bullets like the VLDs or the Hornady ELD matches, they do require a different stem. So they seat the bullet off the sides or the ogive rather than the tip. So just make sure you do a little bit of homework as to what stem's in there, and just check and see if you need to replace it for the bullet that you're trying to use. Worst case scenario, call the manufacturer. If you're thinking of shooting the Hornady 88 grain ELD match and you're using Hornady's die, I'm sure it'll say in there whether or not which stem you need. But worst case scenario, call Hornady customer service and say, hey, look, I'm loading a 22 Creedmoor 88 grain ELD. Here's the competition seating die, do I need a different stem? They're going to say yes or no, and you can buy it and get it and install it into the seating die. So I go through, I seat all my bullets at that point, just verifying that they're to the appropriate seating depth. And then they go into the cleaner one more time to clean all the lube and everything off. I do have a vibrating tumbler, I guess you would call it, and it goes in there, gets all the oil and grease and everything off. But the one-shots are pretty clean lubricant anyway, but I still put them in there and let them run for 20 minutes to make sure I get all the lube off, make them nice and polished. Take them out, clean them all up, put them in a case, and we're ready to go and do some range work. Now, I didn't touch base on working uploads. This is a totally different scenario, and I'm just going to caution you on a couple of different things. Make sure you do your homework and get the books and read it for yourself. Do your homework, get the reloading manuals, read the loading data yourself. Don't just go on the internet searching for people's favorite hand loads for calibers, because you might wind up with really hot loads and having all kinds of trouble doing it. You just can't fix that part. So make sure you do your homework and start low and work your way up. And I try to do, you can do everything from a ladder test, which you can do some research on that online on your own. I find that pretty helpful for some starting points where you'll load up, 10 rounds, 2 or 3/10 of grain apart up to the max load and shoot them at the same bullseye. And you'll watch them string up and down the paper, and there's instructions on how that works. It works pretty well. Or you just start loading 5 and 10 rounds of one powder charge, 10 rounds of another powder charge, 10 rounds of another powder. Go and shoot a couple groups. Start documenting in your logbook, which ones performed well, and start focusing in on those, and then do some small up and down changes for either seating depth or charge weights, and see if you can't fine tune it a little bit better. I mean, my goal is always to try to get an inch group at 300 yards. I mean, to me, that's good shooting. I mean, that's capable of match winning, and unless if it's not a factory gun. So a custom rifle really should even be able to do a little better than that, and try to keep that standard deviation low. I mean, our goal with reloading is really accurate ammunition as well as low standard deviation. So we want our shots to be very close together in speed, so at distance they don't string. And this is one of the reasons why we do hand load, because we can really hyper focus on the powder charges, the full length sizing, case capacity, as we're sizing each one properly and trying to make good ammunition. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And then you'll just go out and shoot more. I really do think that once you get into reloading, you're going to go out and shoot probably twice as much, just because you got to go out and work up hand loads for what you're planning on shooting, which is really nice. I mean, I don't mind going to the range and doing load work. It's a pain in the butt to start getting set up and, going through the motions. But once you get the ammunition loaded, and you're like, that's pretty cool. And then off to the race you go. And then you shoot your first couple groups and you start measuring everything. And then the OCD, ADD kicks in, and then you're off to the races. Well, I got to tighten this up. I'll change this. I'll go here. I'm going to change this load ever so slightly here. Here comes the graphs and charts and everything else you're going to make. And then you're going to start really, really enjoying it. Just trying to make good quality ammunition. That's really what you're trying to do. And controlling it, making it consistent, repeatable, and then go and use your rifle what it was designed to be used for, whether it's match shooting or whether, going for a hunt of a lifetime, all of that. So just enjoy it. As always, feel free to give me a call if you have any questions. Send us some pictures, shoot us an email. Always help out in any way that I can, but hopefully it'll excite you to go out and start making some hand loads. Now, don't forget, we are giving away a stock from MDT. MDT sent us a really nice chassis. It is going to be given away on July 4th. Make sure you go over to our Facebook page. It's Wolf Precision Inc. Tag 3 people. Follow us on Facebook, and you're in the running. We will announce the winner on the 4th of July. So don't forget about getting registered for a free stock that we're going to be giving away. Also, if you've been on our website here the last couple of days, the Wheels of Change are starting. You'll see that over the last week, the prices come off. And you'll see that the prices are slowly getting put back into place. And if you go under our long-range shooting school, you're going to see a Gunsmithing School tab. Well, that is for a couple different reasons. I mean, our goal has always been, as we keep moving forward with the process of what we're doing, to eventually turn the keys over to the customer to let them build the rifle themselves. And we are almost there. And it won't be too much longer. We will be offering the classes and not only teaching you how to build your custom rifle and maintain it, change calibers, replace barrels, But also one thing we're really excited about is the fact that we really think that these chambers are going to last for multiple barrels. And so one of the benefits of the system that we have in place is that, yes, the barrel is a disposable part of the rifle for sure. If you shoot it enough, you're going to shoot the lands and grooves out and away it goes. However, though, because of how we make our rifles and trying to fix the curvature of the bore, meaning we make the chamber separate, there really isn't any damage to the chamber itself, which means you get to reuse it. And I find that to be absolutely awesome. And we are working on a process now that we can change the chambers here for the customer on their behalf, but eventually allowing the customers to change the calibers themselves or take their chambers off and put them on their new barrel. That is what we are working on. That is the future of what we're trying to do. I mean, if you think about how many rebarrels some guys go through in a year, of having to either send the rifle off to a gunsmith and having them Raymond chamber the barrel, and then having to work up their loads for that chamber, adjust their sizing dies, because we're talking reloading here, right? But imagine how much simpler, faster, and easier this would be if you actually reused the same chamber that you were shooting. The only thing you would adjust for if you're reloading, since we're talking reloading, is the fact that you've got a new throat. You're shooting the same chamber. So you pull the chamber off, you get it all cleaned up, spin it on your new barrel, lock it in place, put it in your action, off to the races you go. That is the long-term goal of what we are trying to do. And so the customer can buy the components. There's about 7 involved, really. Now, we're not selling them all. We're going to let the customers pick out their own stocks, order their stocks that they like. The gunsmithing classes that we're going to teach are going to have to do a lot with some of the things you may have to do to the stocks if you want to bed them, or some things to pay attention to when you're building the tools that we use, all this really cool stuff. But we want you to be able to not even just be able to build your own rifle, but then build your buddy's rifle, your neighbor's rifle, build your son a rifle. I mean, it's not a store-bought item. This is something that you're going to take the time together to build. And I find that to be absolutely awesome. So we are working with some local institutions right now to hopefully have you come into Pennsylvania if you would like to join us for one of our classes. Just keep an eye on the website. The page is up, and this is coming soon. And that's what we're working on right now. And the amazing part is it allows us to build what was potentially a $6,000 or $7,000 rifle now. And because we're not building it, and because we're not selling all the parts to build it, of course, we get to remove the excise tax, which is, by the way, 11%. For those that have listened to the podcast, you'll have heard me talk about this before, that as builders grow, this tax that they're obligated to pay. And it's hidden in the cost of the rifle, and it's a lot. And so even when we get to remove that, and then you're able to negotiate better deals, catch your trigger on sale, order your stock when they put them on sale, now you can get into a really nice Macmillan-type rifle, maybe even for less than $3,000. And I find that to be fascinating, knowing that, the custom rifles that we built, till we add the excise tax and labor and everything else that we do here, that, we easily could break $5,000. So right now we're working on it. The dates will be up probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks. The classes will probably start sometime in September. Right now we are going to offer to the customers installing the chambers onto the barrels and sell them as either a barreled action or the action separate and the chambered barrel separate, and then they can install them with the action wrenches from there. So we're slowly starting to move that direction. You get a chance and you want to see some of the stuff that we're working on, you can go over to wolfprecision.net and you can check that out on the website there. Last but not least, I do want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. Hope you guys have a very safe and happy weekend. We're excited to take a couple of days off with some family and friends here, maybe go out and do a little bit of shooting, who knows. I do want to send out, though, that the shooting school is down to 5 slots left for the entire year. So our July and August classes are full. We have a couple of slots left in September and October, and those will be the last that we will offer for the year for this year, because we are so focused on getting ready to launch and start into the Gunsmithing School that we're developing as we speak. So if you would like to join us at the shooting school, we limit it to 5 shooters only, and you're going to come in 1 to 2 instructors. It's a great class. We teach it here in Pennsylvania. Love to have you. But if you are thinking of trying to come this year, please get signed up soon. You can register for that online underneath our Long Range Shooting School page. Again, we only have 5 slots left for the entire year, so looking forward to having you. If you decide to come and join us, we'd love to have you. Now, I do want to give a quick shout out to TriggerTech. They are sponsors of the podcast here, and we really do appreciate their help. We will be selling their triggers as part of our kits with the builds that we will be selling, or the parts and components, and simply because they are that good. And we are excited to announce that we've had the 2 stages on the line for the last class or 2. And oh my gosh, fantastic job, TriggerTech. Really hit it out of the park. And I say all the time that if you're going to replace your trigger in your rifle to make a better rifle, use a better trigger. And we use TriggerTech. I mean, that's what we've used for the last several years. Great product, great design, easy to adjust, easy to install, and user-friendly when it comes to adjusting the trigger pull weight. So thank you, TriggerTech, for supporting our podcast. We really do appreciate it. And to you listeners out there, if you don't mind supporting our sponsors, we really do appreciate that as well. So you can log on to triggertech.com and order your trigger there, or just give us a call here and we can certainly ship you one out. We keep them in inventory on a regular basis. So hope everybody has a great 4th of July weekend. Hope everybody has a safe weekend to get out there. I think the shooting is starting up again. We have calls coming in from customers that ranges are starting to open, matches are starting to come back online. I know we're excited to get out and throw our hat in the ring and have some fun in the field with a rifle. So until next week, hope you guys have a great and safe holiday weekend. The next 5 series of our podcast are going to be on custom rifle building, hence the long range shooting and custom rifle building podcast. So the next couple series are going to have to do with selecting components and things to think about while you're selecting them. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jamie Dotson. I am your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.